Hello. It's great to be here. And I'd like to start by asking a thought experiment. And I'd like you to imagine that you are walking down the street in the beautiful city of Puebla, and someone of the opposite sex walks up to you and asks you one of three questions. Would you go out on a date with me? Would you go back to my apartment with me? Would you have sex with me? This was an actual experiment conducted in Florida, and here are the responses, the percentage of individuals who agreed to these three different requests. Of the women who were asked by the male confederate, this is psychology speak for a member of the experimental team, doesn't mean people from the southern United States. Of the women approached by the male confederates, 56% agreed to go out on a date with him, 6% agreed to go back to his apartment, and 0% agreed to have sex with him. And women in the sex condition thought it was a rather peculiar question. Hi, I've been noticing you around Puebla. Would you have sex with me? Most women need a little bit more information about the guy before responding. Of the men approached by the women, 50% agreed to go out on a date with her, 69% agreed to go back to her apartment, and 75% agreed to have sex with her. For those of you who doubt that men and women differ fundamentally in their underlying sexual psychology, I would draw your attention to these last figures, 0% versus 75%. And even of the 25% of the men who declined the request, many were apologetic about it, citing a girlfriend, a fiancé, asking for a phone number and a rain check. Very, very different responses. Now, what this reflects is male desire for sexual variety. And it's very, very clear that males have a stronger desire for sexual variety, meaning a variety of different sex partners. And this stems from a fundamental fact about human reproductive biology. What is the minimum investment that a woman has to put in to produce a single child? What is it? It's 9 months of pregnancy, right? And it's obligatory. She has no choice. A woman can't say, I'm very busy with my career. I would prefer to only invest 2.5 months. No, it's obligatory. It's part of our reproductive biology. What is the minimum investment that the man has to put in to produce that same child? Okay, well, this is a new record. Someone said 1 second. I would say there are individual differences. But even if it's 1 hour, or if you're the musician Sting and you're into tantric sex and it's 5 hours, it's still substantially different. Now, fortunately, men often do more than the minimum, but you can see that this fundamental sex difference in our reproductive biology produces a different payoff matrix for sexual strategies, where desire for sexual variety is one evolved psychological mechanism that is designed to motivate men to pursue that desire for sexual variety. Now, another thought experiment. Let's assume that I am the king of the world, which I'm not, but for this thought experiment I am. How many sex partners would you like to have over the next month, over the next 5 years, over your lifespan? How many sex partners would you want, ideally, to have? Does everyone have the numbers in mind? Well, I'm not going to ask you because that might embarrass you, but we have the data. Women said on average they would like 0.8 of a sex partner over the next month, gradually escalating to a full sex partner at 6 months, and then leveling off at 4 to 5 in the lifespan. And this is important. Men said that they would like 2 in the next month, 8 in the next couple of years, and 18 in their lifespan. This was after eliminating 3 men in our sample who said they would like 1,000. This desire for sexual variety is an important source of conflict between the sexes. And what I want to highlight now is not love, but the darker side of our mating emotions and our mating motivations. So sexual conflict number 2. So first is desire for sexual variety, which leads to some problems. Second is that it's very clear that men have what we call a sexual overperception bias. And imagine this. You're watching a video, man and a woman are interacting, woman smiles at the man. You stop the videotape and ask, why did she smile at the man? What was her intention? What was she trying to signal? Men are more likely than women to say, oh, it's obvious. She was sending him sexual signals. She was sexually attracted to him. She wanted his body. Women are more likely to say, no, she was just being friendly. She was just being polite. Or if the guy was creepy, maybe she was being a little bit nervous. This sexual overperception bias, we've replicated it in my lab, where we bring people in. It's like a speed dating situation. We bring 5 men and 5 women into the lab, have them interact for a few minutes, and then separate. We say, to what degree did the person you interacted with, to what degree are they interested in you sexually? To what degree are you interested in them sexually? And we find very predictably that males not only have a sexual overperception bias, but what's interesting is that we found that that bias is especially strong with physically attractive women. And what's interesting about that is that physically attractive women, because they are approached more by a larger number of men, that statistically, the average man is least likely to gain reciprocated interest from these women. We also found that women exhibited what we call a sexual underperception bias. They actually underestimated the degree to which the men they interacted with were sexually interested in them. And I have a hypothesis about it. We're still exploring why that occurs. But my hypothesis is that men actually suppress the expression, the overt expression of their sexual interest, in part because expressing sexual interest too early, too soon is a signal of a short-term mating strategy and actually undermines a man who's trying to initiate a mating relationship with the woman. Now, sexual conflict number 3, deception. And I hate to break it to you, but you probably know this, men sometimes lie. But they lie in very predictable ways. And we know this from internet dating studies. They lie about their height. So if they're 5'10", they tend to round up a little bit to 6 feet. Oh yeah, I'm 6 feet. They don't say if they're 5'10", they're 7 feet, but they round up by 2 inches. They lie about their income. They lie about their status. Now, women also deceive. On internet dating sites, they tend to shave off about 15 pounds from their actual weight. And both sexes post photographs that are, let's just say, not entirely representative of what they actually look like. Okay, now, men lie about another thing that's very important after they get together and start interacting. They lie about the depths of their feelings for a woman. They lie about their emotional attachment to the woman, and they do it sometimes in order to have sex with her. And if you want to upset a woman, tell her you love her, have sex, and right after sex say, actually, I was just kidding. I just wanted to have sex with you. Goodbye. I don't feel anything for you. We find that on the 1 to 7 scale, women top out. They're extremely upset about that. Men not terribly bothered by it if the woman lies to them about their feelings. Now, some people argue when they see these findings, well, we know that women are just more emotional than men. Women are more easily upset, and that's the stereotype, but it's actually not true because men get more upset about some other things in a domain-specific way. Misled her or him about her willingness to have sex, or led to believe that sex was forthcoming but said no at the last minute, men more upset about that than women. So this emotional upset is actually domain-specific. It's not a general thing. Sexual conflict number 4, mate value discrepancies. What is mate value? Mate value is a complex constellation of characteristics, and we have to distinguish between long-term mate value, value as a romantic partner, a committed partner, a love partner, a marriage partner, and short-term mate value. And in long-term mate value, it's not just physical attractiveness, it's personality characteristics, it's health, it's his or her coalition, their alliances, their education level, etc. Even sense of humor is very important. Now, not all men believe that women think sense of humor is important. The comedian Jim McFarlane said that one of the things women claim is important is sense of humor, but in my years as a comedian, I've learned that they're usually referring to the humor of guys like Brad Pitt, Tom Cruise, or Russell Crowe. Apparently, those guys are hilarious. Well, sense of humor actually, despite his claim, it actually is important. And sense of humor conveys a wealth of information about someone. In general, it conveys that someone is intelligent, or at least has social intelligence. It also conveys that the person has perspective taking, because it takes a certain amount of agile mind reading to understand what someone else is going to laugh at or what they find humorous at. And couples do pair up. If someone makes them laugh, then that's a key ingredient in long-term mating. Now, back to the issue of mate value. Now, so given that mate value consists of a large constellation of characteristics, there's some consensus about what qualities do make up mate value. Of course, there are individual differences. I'm an academic, and so I like to read a lot, and so I'm attracted to people who also are educated and like to read a lot. Okay, but nonetheless, there's some consensus. And this is illustrated by a woman, a colleague of mine, who came to me and said, David, why is it the case that all the guys I'm interested in show no interest in me, but there are a bunch of guys who are interested in me, but I just am not interested in them? And what I told her is, I said, on the mate value scale, you are an 8, lusting after 10s, and being sought after by 6s. She was targeting men outside of her mate value range and being approached by men also outside of her, lower than her mate value. When she thought about it, she said that this single piece of advice, this single piece of information, was more helpful to her in her subsequent mating than 3 years of psychotherapy. So it is very important to select partners who are within your mate value range. Even if you, let's say you're an 8 and you succeed in attracting a 9 or a 10 for a long-term committed relationship, statistically you will be in for a world of hurt, because they will be statistically more likely to cheat on you and more likely to dump you when someone else better comes along. So this leads to sexual conflict number 5, which is infidelity, which is something that is very common. Estimates of it vary all over the map. The classic Kinsey study put it at about 50% for married men and about 26% for married women. Women are catching up to men, though, in the modern environment. Most people don't cheat, but a substantial minority do. Why? From an evolutionary perspective, it's fairly straightforward to explain why men would be attracted to women other than their wives. And that is, they have this evolved desire for sexual variety. It has been historically a successful strategy, in part, in addition to long-term mating, to secure opportunistic copulations when the costs were low and when the risks were low and when opportunities presented themselves. Women are more complicated, and it's been a puzzle about why women have affairs. And this is a part where I disagree with my colleagues. So in the evolutionary community, the dominant explanation for why women have affairs is what's called the dual mating strategy hypothesis. And that is basically that they secure investment from one guy and good genes from another guy, and so they get the best of both possible worlds. But I think there's a lot of reason to doubt this hypothesis. For one thing, we know statistically, based on DNA fingerprinting technology, that only about 2 to 3% of children are offspring of have a father that is other than the presumed biological father. So most women, to say it slightly differently, most women get genes and investment from exactly the same guy. So why do women do it? And I think there are some clues. One clue is that women who are sexually or emotionally unhappy with their relationship have affairs. Now, this, of course, is blindingly obvious. You know, when I came across it, you could say, well, of course people who are sexually and emotionally unhappy are going to have affairs. Tell me something your grandmother could have told you that. Okay, but there's an interesting sex difference. If you compare men who have affairs with men who do not have affairs, there is no difference in their marital or sexual happiness. So this seems to be something that is specific to women. Second clue. Women who have affairs, about 70% of them become emotionally involved with or fall in love with their affair partner. In contrast, only about 30% of men do. And 3, the qualities desired in an affair partner for women are identical or nearly identical to qualities desired in a long-term committed relationship. That's not true of men. Quick example, intelligence. People, both men and women, want intelligence in long-term mate. Intelligence is also important to women in an affair partner, but for men, it's irrelevant. A woman can just mumble a little bit, and that's okay with them. She doesn't have to be very intelligent for an affair partner. Okay, this leads us to the mate switching hypothesis. I think that all these data point to the notion that women, in part, have affairs to switch mates. And some of it is involved in creating a mate insurance in case something bad happens with their relationship. Sometimes it's they're testing the waters to see if someone better is out there for them. And interestingly, we did a study of backup mates. Women cultivate backup mates, and they especially do it when they think that their relationship might be going down the tubes. One woman said, "Men are like soup. You always want to have some on the back burner." Okay, last sexual conflict is breaking up. About 75 to 85% of people have experienced a romantic breakup in their lifetime, at least one, often more than one. But sexual conflict does not end upon the breakup. For one thing, there's conflict over sexual access, whether it will continue or not. There's also conflict about the act of breaking up. Often it's one person wants to, the other person does not. So there's conflict over that. There's often conflict over the division of resources. I know one couple who had a bitter, drawn-out fight about who would get custody of the dog and who would get visiting privileges for the dog. And then there's conflict over remating. And one of the disturbing things, and this is, I've done a study of 2,500 victims of stalking. Stalking seems to be a post-breakup mating strategy, in part designed to interfere with future mating relationships of their ex, or to reinitiate sexual or a longer-term relationship with their ex. One woman said, "My ex kept physically threatening any guy who came around me, and after 6 months, I got back together with my ex because there were no other guys around." Fortunately, stalking does not work most of the time, and I don't encourage you to do it at all. It's actually illegal and extremely frightening, so don't do it. So, a couple conclusions. Okay, one is that we have to understand, we have to look under the hood of our sexual and mating psychology to understand the ways in which men and women get into conflict. We have to understand, especially men, that they have this sexual overperception bias that leads them to make false inferences about a woman's sexual interest. Now, of course, women sometimes use this or exploit it. I know a woman who, when she drops her car off to the car mechanic, smiles at him. Now, the car mechanic does not think, "Oh, I'm going to get lucky." But in the male brain, if it increases the probability of sex from 0% to 1.5%, he's willing to give her better service on the car. Second, I know a guy who, after he read my work, it was a guy, he was married, but he found himself attracted to women who were not his wife. But after he read my book, The Evolution of Desire, it made him realize that he could be attracted to women, other women, and be in love with his wife. And he said that actually helped him to remain faithful. When he experienced that attraction, he would say, "Oh, that's my evolved desire for sexual variety. It does not mean I don't love my wife." In short, in order to reduce conflict between the sexes, which is one of my goals, we need a deep understanding of the underlying sexual psychology and mating psychology that drives the sexes to have both motivations that interfere with the other's mating strategy, as well as inferential biases that cause them to perhaps make inappropriate approaches in the workplace or even sexual harassment. So in closing, I wish all of you the best of success in your own mating strategies and hope this information helps you to reduce conflicts between the sexes. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Muchas gracias, David. Démosle un gran aplauso a otro porque fue realmente una ponencia maravillosa. y lo voy a abrazar arriesgándome que me acusen a algo, pero no le digan a nadie esto. Ahora vamos a ver el resultado del concurso.
A ver, para eso nos tienen que decir cuál les gusta más, si el de la derecha o el de la izquierda, y votar. A ver, ¿qué tal lo hicieron, Peter?
Les vamos a pedir que voten, ¿ya? Entonces, ¿quién vota por Peter? ¿Ok?
¡Aplausos,
¡Bravo!
aplausos! Ahora, ¿quién vota por ella?
¿Quién vota por Durane?
Peter.
¿Durane?
Isabel, creo que tenemos un problema.
Creo que tenemos un problema.
¿Y el ganador es? Yo creo que un empate.
Sí, yo creo que tenemos
empate.
un empate.
¡Bravo, un
Gracias,
aplauso!
doctor.
¡Bravo!